Students, and I welcome you on behalf of Microlabs for this interesting Regain Season 2 program. And thanks for the initiative taken by Dr. Pratik Das as well as Dr. Biplab ji, who have really helped us in guiding at this program. So today we have the most respectable and senior most faculty of the country. So I request Dr. Biplab ji to welcome the examiner for the day and also welcome all the students on behalf of the entire nephrology team. So thank you very much, sir, and have a good day. Over to you, Dr. Biplabji.
Thank you, Mr. Raja. A very good morning. And on behalf of my co-panelists, I welcome you all to this second session of Renal Classroom of the Regain PG Program Season 2. Today, the discussant is Dr. Ratnesh Ropre from Arintegun Institute of International Cardiac Sciences, Kolkata. And as an examiner, we have an eminent and erudite nephrologist of India, Professor Dr. Dilip Kumar Pahari sir. Dr. Pahari sir is currently the head of the department and director of Medical Institute of Kidney Disease and senior vice chairman of Medica Super Speciality Hospital, Kolkata. Earlier, he has been associated with Arintegun Hospital and IPGME at Kolkata. He is an excellent academician and teacher. He has been instrumental in building up the nephrology training program in all the places he has worked in. And he has taught and taken examination of generations of nephrologists. He is truly the teacher of teachers. Dr. Pratik Das has been guide to Dr. Pratik Das, who is present here. And I have learned a lot while working under his supervision. I'm sure all of us will learn a lot from him today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Pahari, sir, you can start the program, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So, should Dr. Ratnesh start his cases?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello,
So, Dr. Ratnesh, please present your case.
Good morning, sir. So today I'm presenting Mr. Ashok Gogoi, a 52-year-old gentleman from Assam who has completed his schooling till 10th class, a businessman by occupation.
Ratnesh, your video is not on.
Yes, okay.
This patient, Mr. Ashok Gogoi, 52-year-old gentleman from Assam who has completed schooling till 10th class, a businessman by occupation, has been admitted for workup for renal transplant. History of present illness. He was already till age of 35 years when in 2004 he was diagnosed with diabetes mellitus on evaluation for significant weight loss. He was started on oral antihyperglycemic agents. His compliance was poor and he had irregular follow-up with his physician. In 2014, 10 years later, on follow-up, he was diagnosed to have hypertension. On further evaluation, he was found to have proteinuria also. He was started on antihypertensive medications, name of which he doesn't remember properly. Over the next 2 years, his blood pressure remained stable. However, since 2016, his requirement for antihypertensive medications had increased. On evaluation, he was found to have renal dysfunction with creatinine of 2. At that point of time, he had no skin rash, joint pain, red-colored urine, diarrhea, vomiting, back pain, or over-the-counter analgesic intake history. There was no difficulty in micturition in the form of straining or hesitancy, except for nighttime awakening for micturition for 2 to 3 times. He was never given option for renal biopsy and continued on medical treatment. Meanwhile, he had been referred to ophthalmologist for assessment. He had been having changes associated with diabetic retinopathy. He was given some eye drops and had undergone one costly injection treatment in his left eye on later date for decreased vision. Over the next 3 years, his creatinine slowly increased and reached 6 in 2018. In 2020, 1 year back, he became symptomatic in the form of loss of appetite, swelling of limbs, and weakness of weakness with reduced urine output. On evaluation, he was found to have advanced renal failure with creatinine of 10, and he was initiated with hemodialysis through temporary access. After 1 month, his temporary access was changed to tunnel catheter following Doppler evaluation. He was on erythropoietin stimulating agents and required 2 units of PRBC transfusion also. At the time of initiation of dialysis, residual urine output was around 600 to 800 ml per day with medicines to increase urine output, which has now decreased to less than 100 ml per day. Presently, he has good appetite, stable weight of 63 kg with interdialytic weight gain of 1.5 to 2 kg in thrice weekly dialysis schedule. Initially, he had difficulty in salt restriction, used to have increased blood pressure. However, now his blood pressure is stable on 2 medication. He has been vaccinated for hepatitis B. Since last 1 year, he has noticed pain in calf muscles during walking, which is relieved by rest. A small blackish ulcer over the right great toe, tip of right great toe, has developed since last 6 months. It is painful, well demarcated margins. After initial progression, it has become static, less painful with treatment. He denies history of angina, palpitations, orthopnea, paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea, or any focal generalized weakness. With this history, patient has come to us for renal transplant with wife as a prospective donor with same blood group.
Sure. I mean, from the history and the so far you have presented, whether can you say whether he's suffering from diabetic nephropathy or a diabetic kidney disease? What is the difference between a diabetic nephropathy and diabetic kidney disease?
Sir, diabetic kidney disease is usually a clinical diagnosis following if the patient is having a natural course of diabetic kidney disease progression. And diabetic nephropathy is usually histological diagnosis. If there is a biopsy proven nephropathy, which is of diabetic kidney disease.
See, if you don't do the biopsy, then you don't diagnose a diabetic nephropathy.
Sir, still we can consider if there is no additional symptoms like systemic involvement are not there, or history is quite suggestive of.
So, I mean, see, even though this is a theoretical discussion, what is the distinction between a diabetic nephropathy and diabetic kidney disease? So, if you have to give in a diagnosis at this stage, based on the history, whether he suffers from a diabetic nephropathy giving rise to CKD or diabetic kidney disease going to CKD. You follow, this is a very clear distinction.
Sir, diabetic kidney disease. Diabetic kidney disease could be
okay, you better go and read it because there is a little more discussion on it. You can go and read it. The next question is, what the additional history you should ask for at this stage? Additional history. You completed this. What the additional history you should ask in this patient, which is not you have mentioned? Have you asked for a claudication?
Yes, sir. He had claudication, history of claudication since last 1 year.
Okay, the smoking history is important in claudication, is it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what additional history you should ask? This patient of a diabetic nephropathy or diabetic kidney disease is going into end-stage renal failure and waiting for your transplants. So what in the transplant workup, what additional information you want to take?
Sir,
History.
yes, sir, from history, whether patient is developing any other complications of diabetes, long-term diabetes, like cardiovascular complications or
History, what you should prompt you to ask him.
so history suggests a peripheral vascular disease
Like,
and
like,
like a diabetic foot or uh, ischemic ulcers or claudications or
you don't ask anything about the heart. What is the clinical history of the heart failure?
yes, the patient can have angina equivalent or palpitations or exertional dyspnea, or he can also have paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea also.
Okay, some history at this stage is very important apart from the workup. So you can go for the workup. I mean, clinical, physical examination and workup. Is that the part, or you want to discuss only on basis of this presentation?
Sir, other examination, yes, sir. The family history, personal history, and general examination.
Yes. So what are the examination findings? What should you positive? You tell me the positive findings you want to look for.
Sir, on examination, there's a history suggests a peripheral vascular disease. There's diminished diminished pulsations in popliteal artery and dorsalis pedis and posterior tibial artery in the lower limb.
Both lower limbs.
Yes, both lower limbs, sir.
Okay. What else?
There is a foot ulcer present at tip of right
You
great
should
toe.
check some relevant points you should not do. You should check the blood pressure in all four limbs and see the blood pressure difference. So
Yes,
what is the pressure difference? Okay.
yes, sir.
So you should look for that. And the peripheral equality of peripheral pulses in all four limbs, including, as you said, there are diminished pulsation in the popliteal and dorsalis pedis artery. Is that
Yes,
point you are saying? Okay.
yes.
So suppose I'll give a jump question. Suppose you do a transplant. After transplant, the patient now comes. The patient does not have a claudication at this moment, but after transplant, the patient comes with a claudication. So what happen after transplant?
So post-transplant, there is an increase in the blood supply to the lower limbs is partially diverted to the graft kidney. So there will be decreased blood supply if it is already compromised with peripheral vascular disease or atherosclerotic lesions. So
Yes.
patient will now develop claudications.
Okay, good, very good. So you, have you finished the examination? You should check the, in the exam, you should not miss the eye fundoscopic examination. What in the fundus you should look for?
Sir, in fundoscopy, for this patient particularly, who is having long-term diabetes mellitus and hypertension, we should look for changes for diabetic retinopathy as well as hypertensive retinopathy.
Okay.
Apart from that, there could be.
How do you say that there is a proliferative retinopathy?
Sir, there will be neovascularization in the on fundoscopic examination with increased fragility. Apart from that, there could be on angiography, fluorescent angiography, there will be oozing of the dye. So that will suggest a neovascularization.
The injection they have offered actually, the eye surgeons have given injection. What is this injection, and what is the aim for this?
So fluorescein dye, sir.
Fluorescein dye is for
Yes.
investigation, but they
Yes, sir.
often give you something
Injection
for the yes.
treatment. So for treatment, anti-vascular endothelial growth factor antibody is given. That is bevacizumab is given.
That reduces neovascular formation.
Pardon, sir.
That prevents the new vascular formation in the retina. Is that?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So what else you want to, let me finish the question first and then we'll go for the, let me finish the exam first. Have you finished the exam? And anything else you want to say this patient?
Sir, on general examination, there's a peripheral positions are not felt in popliteal artery and dorsalis pedis. Apart from that, there's decreased blood pressure in the lower limbs. There's a pallor is present on general examination. Apart from this, there's a foot ulcer on the right great toe with punched out nature and black gangrenous space. There's some reduced hairs and shiny skin is there on lower limb. Apart from that, so nothing.
Okay,
else, sir.
okay. So now let's assume that this patient came to you when the EGFR was more than 30. Say the EGFR was 40 and the patient has got a vascular disease and diabetes. He has proteinuria. What are the
Yes, sir.
medications you want to treat for this patient?
Sir, at this stage, to prevent the progression of the disease, we
You
will
have
have
to look
to
for the lipid profile. First, you said that you have to look for the lipid profile as well and the propensity for atherosclerosis. So
Yes.
what are the tests you do for the atherosclerosis checkup?
Sir, in hands we can do Allen's test. Apart from that, in examination of peripheral pulses in the lower limb, differentiation of blood pressure. Apart from the test investigation, we do Doppler evaluation for blood vessels. And
The
in
most
case
important,
of
what is the ankle brachial index?
yes, ankle brachial index.
So what is
Sir,
that?
there is
What is the normal ratio?
no, sir, I'm not remembering this.
Okay. So ankle brachial index, ankle popliteal index, or brachial popliteal index, people do. If the ratio is more than 0.6, actually, then it's good. I mean, then there is much less of flow problem. So you have to know that whether the flow is there. And apart from the, if you have to look for the arterial thrombosis and particularly intimal thrombosis, then you have to do angio, not ultrasound Doppler may not be good enough. So what is the workup, for example, I mean, what are the medicines you should give for prevention of progression of both atherosclerosis and diabetic kidney disease when you got a patient at the EGFR of 40?
Sir, for
You
further
should look
prevention.
for, I mean, that at that point, you should look for the peripheral vascular disease, you should look for the proteinuria, you should look for the lipid profile, and other comorbidities, you should look for smoking history and so on. And the patient is diabetic with a moderately advanced, say, proteinuria, the lipid profile is abnormal, and so on. So what are the treatment option you give for the patient with a EGFR of 40?
Sir, first will be lifestyle modification. That is
Okay.
uh, 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 mild to moderate exercise, decreased smoking, decreased salt intake. Apart from that, next will be
Diabetic diet. You have to say the diabetic diet.
diabetic
Okay.
diet.
Or
Then medications to control lipids if it is still not controlled with dietary or lifestyle modification, then anti-hyperglycemic agents, and last will be antihypertensive medications to control blood
So
pressure.
you tell the specific what antihypertensive, what anti-diabetic agents you want to give at when the patient EGFR is not less than 30. I mean, is more than 30. So that is exactly what I am asking.
Sir, in anti-hyperglycemic agents, below GFR 45, metformin cannot be given. The best possible treatment at below GFR 30, around GFR 30 will be insulin, DPP4 inhibitors, then SGLT2 inhibitors, and these are the
I mean,
medications.
I'll give you some hints actually here. I mean, you have to give both statins. Make sure whether you want to give high intensity statin or moderately intensive statin. Second is you have to look for the triglyceride, and if you have to reduce triglyceride, you have to calculate the GFR and decide whether you give to fenofibrate or you have to give, I mean, lopid. So that choice he has there. The second is I told you the EGFR is around 40, it's not 30. I mean, it's little more than 30. So creatinine is possibly less than 2. So at that stage, if you have to prevent the progressive atherosclerosis, the best drug is GLP-1 analog. That is what the point I am asking you. So you have to talk about the GLP-1 analog. So how does it act?
Sir, GLP-1 is normally secreted from colon, and it decreases gastric motility, decreases hepatic gluconeogenesis, and improves peripheral glucose consumption. So, GLP-1 and in this way they decrease blood sugar. Main action is on gastric motility. They reduce the gastric.
That's okay. So this is how they control sugar. What is the benefit of GLP-1 in kidney disease? So, or in the atherosclerotic disease here?
They
I mean,
they
I'll
have
because possibly you might not know, because I'll summarize here. They increase more, metabolize more of a free fatty acid. They liberate free fatty acid, utilize the body fat. So the prevention of atherosclerotic disease is the one most significant benefit with the GLP-1. They also reduce proteinuria. So given a choice, patient who is presenting at a GGFR of say more than 30, I mean 40 or 40, more than 40, 50, then the GLP-1 analog is possibly the number one drug. Second is SGLT2 inhibitors at that stage. If the patient has already signs and symptoms of a peripheral vascular disease, GLP, SGLT inhibitors, sodium glucose transport inhibitors are not a good drug because they increase more chances of peripheral amputation. So more amputation is there with the SGLT2 inhibitors, and therefore they are not a good drug. And then you have to give statins, and then look for whether it's suitable for fenofibrate or lopid, gemfibrozil, and then you have to go for the ACE inhibitor or ARB in reducing proteinuria. Smoking, so cessation of smoking, control of diabetes, of the anti-diabetic drug GLP-1 analogs, and then you cannot give GLP-1 analogs with the DP4 inhibitors because they act to the same incretin pathway. And then you can obviously, at that point of time, depending upon EGFR, you can add metformin, or if it is metformin is not there, if you have to use, you can use the glycoside or so on. And of course, the insulin. Insulin is there. So all these were necessary when he was EGFR was more than 40. At this stage, suppose at this stage, now you are looking for transplants, workup. So what is your treatment for diabetes? What is your special workup for the transplant in this patient?
Uh,
There is a question whether is a saroglitazar can be given.
Saroglitazar can be given if yes, the saroglitazar can be given, but at this stage, not possible with the
Not
low GFR.
possible. Yes. So the next question is, this patient you are being worked up for the kidney transplant. So now at this stage, what is your special workup other than the normal routine kidney transplant patient? This patient has got a complication like peripheral vascular disease primarily. So what do you look for?
Sir, with respect to peripheral artery disease, we will have to evaluate patient for uh, the if there is a chances of stroke phenomena after transplanting the kidney and increasing the chances of limb ischemia. Another factor will be if since there is a peripheral artery disease, there's high likelihood that patient can have cardiovascular disease also, which are for which he is not yet symptomatic. So we will have to go for evaluation for silent ischemia, if any, or any coronary artery disease.
See,
Subclinical.
like I'll give you some lead questions. What is one question is, suppose you have to anastomose the renal artery with the either internal iliac artery or external iliac or whatever common iliac. Where is the artery you want to implant? How do you decide that? क्या करते हैं?
Okay, sir. Better for anastomosis is internal iliac artery, as it will be
And
end-to-end
this patient, what do you want to do?
Sir, so there is a high chances of atherosclerotic changes in internal iliac artery. So we may have to go for external iliac artery itself for
which area? I mean, how do you decide which area?
Sir, sorry, sir, I can't.
So the issue here, you have to take a CT, plain CT of the pelvis, and
Yes,
see
sir.
the arterial calcification. So even in the peripheral vascular disease, there are more of a medial calcification rather than intimal atherosclerotic plaque. So these patients have got a more of calcification of external or internal iliac arteries, and then you have to find out which portion of the artery is free from calcification and select from pre-transplant which area you want to do for the renal artery anastomosis. So this is one of the, it's not angio is necessary because you don't look for the intimal blockage there. You look for the medial calcification. That will come in the plain X-ray, CT, plain CT. The other thing is that for the peripheral vascular disease, either you need a angio actually. You need a angio of the both the lower limbs. If there is a severe blockage, including atherosclerotic blockage, then you need a angioplasty before, or angioplasty or bypass, whatever you need, depending upon the severity, and you need that before you go for the procedure. And like all other patients, you need to have a cardiac also. So there are few indications for the coronary angio. What are the indications for a coronary? You do the echo, you do the X-ray. What are the indications for coronary angio, and what are the other workup for the cardiac if you want to go for transplant in this case?
If patient is symptomatic for angina equivalent, we will have to go for coronary angiography. If patient is asymptomatic, however, dobutamine stress echo or stress echo or stress echo is positive, whether it's pharmacological or exercise induced. If it is positive, then we will have to go for angiography for this patient.
If you have to, most people nowadays does the dobutamine stress echo. You do the not routine echo, but you go for the dobutamine stress echo. If it is positive, then you go for the angio. If it is negative, possibly you don't need it. And the history, as I was asking you, if the patient is having a PND, I mean orthopnea or PND, then this is a patient who needs a serious cardiac workup before you go for the transplant. Sure.
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, what are the additional pre-transplant workup you look for this in this patient? Diabetic patient and then this atherosclerotic.
Uh,
You have looked for the peripheral vascular disease, and then you have looked for the cardiac. You have to look for the which arteries you want to give. And then sometimes the patient often has got diabetic cystopathy or what is
yes,
called
sir.
neurogenic bladder. They are often unable to pass
Yes,
urine after the bladder implantation. So these are so many factors in this patient before you go for the, and what is the evidence of neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy. You have not told us anything about neuropathy. All these we are discussing about the peripheral vascular disease. Many patients with the they often have got a severe peripheral neuropathy. These are not going to reverse with the only kidney transplant. What are the indications for diabetic uh, combined pancreatic and kidney transplants? Which patients
Sir,
benefit from the pancreatic transplants? Simultaneous pancreas kidney transplant.
sir, patients with diabetic kidney disease can have uh, type 1 diabetes, diabetes mellitus with diabetic kidney disease, or in some cases, type 2 diabetes mellitus with diabetic kidney disease are benefited with a pancreatic transplant. There can be reversal of some diabetic nephropathy changes also. Apart from that, patients who are uh, type 1 diabetic mellitus patient, they are specially benefited with simultaneous kidney, pancreas and kidney transplant.
Is the patient who had brittle diabetes? So this now type 1 is okay, but even in type 2, if the patient is brittle diabetes, it is difficult to control. They are the patients who is benefited from the pancreas transplant. So if you do the, I mean, which is better, simultaneous kidney pancreas kidney or the pancreas after kidney, and why?
So recently, so pancreas after kidney is favored, as there can be some reversal of kidney damage also with improvement in uh, uh, glycemic status of the patient.
It's a simultaneous pancreas kidney is far better than pancreas after kidney, but it's the second best. Simultaneous is obviously better. Shikha Sharma is, I mean, responding to a lot of questions. So, suppose you do a transplant, and now post-transplant, how do you follow up the patient? What is your prescription for the diabetes control? Now the patient has got a normal GFR.
So post-transplant for diabetes control and immediate post-transplant period, we will with induction therapy like with high dose of methylprednisolone or corticosteroids immediately post-transplant, patient may require insulin therapy. Apart from that, we can start after initial stabilization, immediate post-transplant period of say after
What
1
is
month, we
steroid-free
can start.
regimen? Wait. What is steroid-free regimen? Say, suppose one center say in the this is a diabetic, brittle diabetes, and I don't want to. I want to go for the steroid-free protocol in this patient. So what is steroid-free protocol? You want
The
to do a kidney
steroid-free
transplant.
protocol.
Yes, carry on, carry on.
The steroid-free protocol includes total steroid avoidance, otherwise steroid minimization, or steroid minimization. That includes stoppage of steroids by 8 days in some centers, or in some centers without steroids. Means after induction, there is no steroids are used. That
Normally, normally the definition is if you have to you give in induction therapy up to 6 days, early withdrawal up to 6 or 7 days you have to stop. You don't give beyond 6 or 7 days. So that is called steroid-free protocol. I think in a given choice, if you go for the both ATG induction as well as the other therapy, you should look for the steroid-free protocol in this case. So this is a good option. Second is apart from you have chosen steroid-free protocol, so steroid-induced diabetes is not there. I mean, further will not be there. What are the other drugs you want to use after this transplant? GLP-1 analogs, actually,
Sir,
that's what I am asking. Why
yes.
don't you use the GLP-1 analogs? SGLT2 inhibitors may be risky because of the peripheral vascular disease. You have to use statins, you have to use fenofibrates if necessary, you have to give uh, you have to give other insulins as if you are not doing the simultaneous kidney pancreas transplants. I think we have some period past. I think Biplab, you can start initiating the chat box. There are a few questions. You can read it from Biplab. Dr. Biplab Ghosh.
Yeah, sir, in chat box, actually, they are mostly answering whatever you are asking.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
So they are giving answer from their end like that.
Okay. So,
only our role of saroglitazole was being asked. Otherwise, they have actually answered your questions.
Okay, okay, okay. So you want to add something? And Pratik, Dr.
Pratikda might like to. Pratikda, would you like
Pratik,
to?
you want to add something?
No, sir, I was listening. Just if you finish, then I will sum up. But you can ask some more questions, sir. It is very interesting.
Sure. I mean, Ratnesh.
Yes, sir.
So I think your center, are you not practicing steroid-free protocol? There are many centers who practice steroid-free protocol. They are vehemently opposed this patient going into these transplants and not practicing steroid-free protocol. Steroid-free protocol is very good actually. There is nothing wrong in steroid-free protocol. We have done a lot of patients with the steroid-free protocol. So, or the many patients actually what they do, they rapidly reduce the steroid dose to minimum of 5 or even 2.5 milligram per day. But if you keep to 5 milligram per day, that may be a good enough. That may be good enough. But controlling, how to control? So SGLT2 inhibitors in a, I mean, that is one of the time drug is not. What is Finrenon? What is, suppose this patient has got a cardiomyopathy and your ejection fraction, heart failure with the reduced ejection fraction, you find that the pre-transplants, your ejection fraction was 30, and post-transplant, it's only 35. So you want to improve his cardiac function, or at least prevent the progression of cardiac function. What are the medicine you want to give for improving cardiac function in this patient?
Sir, for improving or stabilizing cardiac function in this patient, ACE inhibitors can be useful. Apart from that, SGLT2 inhibitors can be useful, and the Finrenon, as you mentioned just now, that can be, this aldosterone antagonist can be useful.
Okay, so what is the advantage of finerenone over other aldosterone antagonists?
The finerenone has so exact pharmacology I don't remember, but finerenone is having less hyperkalemia compared to other aldosterone antagonists.
Less hyperkalemia, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but it prevents the inflammation and fibrosis in the cardiac muscle.
Yes, sir.
Inflammation and fibrosis, so it's a much better than the either aldosterone or even eplerenone. So because what these other two,
Yes.
eplerenone and they cause more of hyperkalemia. So more of hyperkalemia, and therefore the finerenone causes less hyperkalemia, and therefore is possibly more protective. If it is available, we can use. But SGLT2 inhibitor and as well as GLP-1 analog, both of them are helpful in preserving the cardiac function. What are the other drugs actually? Suppose the patient and remains is a poor heart failure with poor ejection fraction. Does not improve with the surgery, transplant surgery. So what are the drugs you should look for? I mean, you have given ACE inhibitor or ARB, you have given this SGLT2 inhibitor. Then what is next drug? What are the
Sir,
next drugs?
for this part, so we can use sacubitril and valsartan combination. That has been shown to have better control of better this improval of ejection fraction of the heart.
Arni,
Apart from
you are
that,
saying Arni. They are also okay.
okay, yes.
Sacubitril and valsartan combination. Yes. Okay. What else? So the patient is a heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. So how do you manage it?
Sir, additionally for management, we can use diuretics. But in particularly chlorothalidamide, which has been found to have reduced sudden cardiac death in patients with low ejection fraction.
It reduces heart failure symptoms, but it does not improve mortality. So what are the other drugs? Arni is okay. You have given Arni or a inhibitor ARB. And what are the other drugs?
So SGLT2 inhibitors has been recently shown to have.
What else? Beta blockers.
Beta
Beta
blockers.
blockers. You should say beta blockers. So these three are, they are. What are the newer drugs actually? Finerenone has coming up. Finerenone
Yes,
or
sir.
MRA actually. MRA is a group including finerenone. What else?
No, sir. Sorry, sir.
Okay. So 1N cyclase inhibitors and myosin in stimulators. So there are new drugs actually which is coming on the pathways. But then you have to make sure that the patient who has got suppose a patient you find that the dobutamine stress echo pre-transplant dobutamine stress echo is positive, and you have done the coronary angio, and you find that the angio there is a blockage. So blockage in two vessels. So what do you do?
Blockage in two vessels. Okay. Sir, uh, we can go for angioplasty, or we can go for coronary artery bypass surgery. It has been seen that coronary artery bypass surgery is patients do better with post-transplant, transplant and post-transplant period.
Bypass.
Yes, sir.
Bypass. How long you want to wait for after bypass or angioplasty? So you
Sir,
have done
with
angioplasty.
newer,
How long you want to wait?
So with newer anti-platelet drugs or newer stents, we can go for transplant surgery. We can reduce the antiplatelets by 3 months itself. So ideally, we should wait for 6 to 12 months for antiplatelets. We should continue for antiplatelets, and otherwise we can go for a reduction of antiplatelets by 3 months itself.
Sure, 3 months actually. Sure, somebody has Sika has responded bypass for 2 weeks and the stenting for 4 weeks. I think a lot of people actually has to wait for some period. Which patient actually, suppose if you do a transplant and then after transplant, you find that the patient, the graft is not functioning. Immediately prior to transplant, you have done a peripheral angio, and after that you find, sorry, you find no significant atherosclerosis, and you enter for the transplants, and you find that the graft is not functioning. So what can happen to this graft?
Sir,
Is a
I could not read, sir. There was a network problem.
The life-related transplants and the graft is not functioning immediately, and you find that you have a history of angio few days back for the evaluation. What is atheroembolic disease?
Atheroembolic disease.
So it's
Sir,
not good. So you did angio.
due to
Yes.
Sir, due to cholesterol emboli, there can be graft dysfunction immediately after the transplantation.
So it's possible. How do you, I mean, think of that this may be atheroembolic disease? How do you suspect and what is your diagnosis? You do, this is common, this can happen actually. You did a peripheral angio to see the peripheral vascular disease, and the surgeon is in a hurry and then says, I'm in a weekend, I can go and do a transplant right now. So he didn't wait for the effect of angiography to disappear. He did a transplant on Friday. And then you say that the graft function is not there. In Monday, you say that there is no urine. So this may be a case of a peripheral, atheroembolic disease. So because of the effect of the peripheral angio actually. So the peripheral signs you have to see. Cholesterol plaques in the vessels and then which has been displaced. I think Pratik, you can add actually, Pratik or Biplav, we can add. We can see the questions from, if you have the students, if you have any questions you have left.
So one student has asked for other DDs in this case.
Other
The
DD.
differential diagnosis.
Okay. So this patient has got a known diabetes and then CKD, peripheral vascular disease. What is the differential diagnosis of kidney disease? Is that the question he's asking?
I think so. I mean, otherwise,
So what is the differential diagnosis possible?
Sir, in this patient, primary diabetes disease can be complicated by repeated episodes of acute kidney injury due to infections, which are quite common, including skin infections or lower respiratory tract infection. Apart from that, there can be secondary glomerulonephritis, de novo glomerulonephritis on the top of diabetic disease itself.
So basically, I mean, the first point I was asking earlier, whether it is a diabetic nephropathy or it is a diabetic kidney disease. So the distinction is that in patient with type 1, even without kidney biopsy, if you have a proteinuria and elevated, I mean reduced eGFR, then possibly you are dealing with a diabetic nephropathy, even without biopsy. But in patients actually like non-proteinuric, patient has got a peripheral vascular disease. The patient who often we call it a diabetic kidney disease. There may be a glomerular sclerosis secondary to hypertension or other causes and peripheral vascular disease. And therefore, we often call this a diabetic kidney disease. So, the one question often asked actually, suppose do you know the Morganson's staging of diabetic nephropathy? What Morganson said in the 80s, that the diabetic nephropathy, he divided into 5 different stages. Do you know that?
So I'm not remembering exactly the hyperfiltration stages.
Yes, the hyperfiltration, yes. Then
there's a stage of proteinuria and then reduced GFR. That's what I'm remembering, not exactly.
that is a clinical staging nowadays we do, but the Morganson and Bibeti, they defined actually the so-called microalbuminuria, and they said that you have the hyperfiltration, then the normal stage, and then there the microalbuminuria or elevated protein excretion nowadays we call it. Then there is stage 4 when the eGFR is reduced, and finally end-stage renal failure. So that 5 stages has been challenged by a lot of people. So what is the, I mean, since you don't know what is the Morganson staging, you cannot say what is the controversy to the Morganson staging. Suppose a patient has got a moderately severe albumin excretion in type 1. Is it possible that the proteinuria can regress or even normal? Or is it a
Yes.
progressive disease?
Sir, there is a chances that it can stay static in one-third patient. One-third of patient it stays static. In one-third of patient it responds to treatment with ACE inhibitors or SGLT2 inhibitors, and in one-third of patient it progresses despite treatment with the time, though in a slower speed.
Yes. So I think if there are anything questions in the chat box, we can discuss.
So,
Biplab?
Sir, you have addressed almost all.
so can I summarize now?
Yes.
Will you
Yeah.
So
You can, yes, good. You and video you have to, Biplab, video you have to.
Yeah.
answer.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
okay.
You have to
So
summarize it. Yes. Go
two
ahead.
things are basically left. One thing is your assessment regarding the student, whether he should pass or not. Number one, and next, I just give a summary of the class. Dr. Ratnesh has presented 52 years male with the end-stage renal disease with a long history of hypertension and diabetes with a significant history of claudication and the peripheral vascular disease. And he is planned for transplantation. And in the history, he has to mention more about this, whether there is any claudication pain or there is any angina or any symptoms related to heart failure. And in the examination finding, one must mention that the blood pressure differences in all 4 limbs of the peripheral pulses, how is that, especially patient when dealt in a peripheral vascular disease, having a peripheral vascular disease. Fundoscopy examination is very important because it has a different treatment plan, and you have to know something about this diabetic retinopathy and its latest treatment and what is the idea behind it. And not only the pulsation, there is maybe different indices, brachial, popliteal indices that you should know. And this is also important. These things are also very much important in the transplant period, because in the pre-transplant workup, you need to evaluate for claudication, because you need to see, they need to prevent that if the patient is have come to in the earlier stages, if you must give an GLP-1 analogs, and you should avoid these SGLT2 inhibitors, because they have more chances of developing the peripheral gangrene and amputation. And you must consider the statin. You should check for triglycerides, whether you should give a fenofibrate or gemfibrozil. And if they are planned for transplantations, pre-transplantation coronary artery disease is important. Coronary angiogram is important. After with or without doing a low vitamin stress echo, if there's a disease, then you should treat prior to that, either PTC or the CABG, and you should wait for some time, and that varies from institute to institute. And if the patient has a plan for transplantation like these patients, and the three things will be considered, that is an anastomotic site, whether you are planning it externally or internally, and you must look for the calcification, not the lumens. So plain CT may be a good thing. Regarding peripheral vascular disease, we should evaluate the peripheral vascular disease, and we must treat it prior to that, because otherwise patient will develop gangrene in the post-transplant period, and that will be an adverse outcome. And this cardiovascular evaluation is very important, and also the important is the cystopathy evaluation and for the neurogenic bladder, because when the patient will pass more of urine and there is a possibility of the neurogenic bladder is there, there will be lots of complications. And you should know about the indication at this era, whether diabetes is the main cause of the renal disease. What are the indications of this simultaneous liver and kidney transplantation? And also the patient is having a diabetes and he will get steroids and tacrolimus. So what I must know, the doctors should have been answered, what is the steroid-free regimen or the protocols, and how they can be given, how they can be practiced, and how it will be treated in the post-transplant period. Diabetic control is very important in this patient, and in the post-transplant period, patient cardiac function may not improve. In this situation, even drugs like Findrenon or other options, Ecubitril, that should be considered. And this is there may be, if you do a procedure prior to the transplantations and the graft doesn't function even after live transplantation, you must consider as atheroembolic renal disease, and they should be looked into and they should be treated. But one thing, Mogensen's, the old classifications of diabetic nephropathy that has been done long before, and you must know that. That's why you can understand the controversies whether diabetic nephropathy is a static thing or a dynamic thing, whether protein resolves or not. So whenever you are doing a dealing with a patient, and these things to be considered are excellently described from a clinician's perspective, not a theoretical one. And with this discussion, I think at the end of the session, you must have an idea how to go about a patient of a transplant, diabetic kidney disease, or a diabetes patients with so many complications in the kidneys, in the peripheral vessels, in the heart or the retina.
Yes, I think Professor Pratik Das has done an excellent summary of what is to be learned actually. For Ratnesh, I think you have to learn a little bit of, possibly you are not aware of steroid-free protocol. I mean, you should go and read it. And you also read it, most important actually, what was the Mogensen initial staging, and why Mogensen staging is now not considered, because of the some simultaneous evidence of other injuries going on while the and then that dictates that Mogensen staging is not, a progressive disease, and why there is a difference. And then when you are carrying a patient now for a transplant, lot of people have got a very severe expectation from after transplant. They feel that they will be 100% okay after transplant. That is not so actually. The patient peripheral vascular disease is not going to improve significantly. Neither neuropathy is going to significantly improve, nor the retinopathy. So these are all progressive disease. And then maybe simultaneous pancreas and kidney transplants may prevent retinopathy, further progression of retinopathy and possibly neuropathy. So that's the reason for the simultaneous pancreas kidney transplant. And think few areas you need to read, but your preparation is excellent. Possibly you will pass. I don't think you'll, I mean, nobody can fail you, but you have to read it little bit there. And the diabetes is a vast area. And see here, the patient actually you have chosen, there are few areas. One is this patient is a diabetic background. Any patients, I mean, examiner can ask you anything related to diabetes. He is on dialysis. The examiners can ask you anything related to diabetes. We have not gone through that aspects today. And then patient is being prepared for transplant. So anything can related to transplants, can the examiners can ask for that. So we have choose not to go for the dialysis questions in this session. How to dialyze and whether, I mean, so if you make AV fistula, what are the problems with the AV fistula, and how do you manage that, and with the peripheral vascular disease and so on. So you a tunnel catheter and short these two transplant may be a good option. But so these are the few question areas of question. This patient has got a all sorts of nephrology questions can have. They you can be asked on the general nephrology, you can ask on the dialysis, you can ask for the transplants, post-transplant complications, how to manage a patient. So all these can come up in this patient actually. So your preparation is good. I think few questions here and there you have to read. Particularly you have to go and read about this steroid-free protocol, then how to because of the simultaneous pancreas kidney, because if this patient, I mean diabetic patient comes into the question and having a retinopathy where patient the doctor has given some injection, possibly anti-angiogenic growth factor injections in the eye, so prevention of and progression of retinopathy, so you do a transplant and the patient becomes blind after some time, so the patient will curse you. I mean, have you told actually that this is an option? At least you should tell a patient, ये इसका ये इतना option है. And then the options are not available, that's okay. The people will agree. But because a lot of people has got a huge expectation from you. I mean, you means as a physician or nephrologist. So you have to tell the patient like this. Yes, people.
Yes, sir. Excellent deliberation. And actually, we were just listening to what you're all teaching us. And Ratnesh, definitely you have to go and read about diabetic kidney disease and diabetic nephropathy. I mean, it's not only about the glomerulus, all the compartments of kidneys are involved in diabetes. And that's a recent development pertaining to that. An announcement to all the participants actually for the next sessions. If someone wants to volunteer to present the case or be discussant, please mail to the mail ID that has been given in the chat box so that we can actually talk to you. And Pratik, now should we go to OSCE session?
Yes, now we should go to the
So it's over to Dr. Ravi Ranjan. Dr. Ravi, can you start the OSCE session?
Good morning, everyone. For next few minutes, we'll be quickly going into some OSCE questions and answers. That will help us in giving some answers and explanations or questions if you have any, sir, regarding these OSCE questions. We are already 1 hour and 10 minutes into the discussion, so let's quickly go into the OSCE. Mr. Vijay, please, next slide, please. Yes. So the first question says, 58 years old COVID-19 patient with 12 hospitalization on 12th hospitalization day developed vasoplasia, anuria, and rise of creatinine from 0.9 to 2.1 in 48 hours time. He was prescribed following therapeutic measure. Next slide. Dr. Ratnesh, please see the video and the picture given there. So there is a schematic diagram given on the right side, and the video that is showing the procedure which is being performed. Please name the therapeutic modality and the components of this modality which is being performed in this COVID-19 patients with acute kidney injury. Dr. Ratnesh.
So, this is a hematobsorption column that is for absorption of cytokines, means cytokine storm which happens in COVID-19 patients.
Okay.
And
what are the components of this modality?
there is an absorption column, and it is connected in series with a CRRT circuit.
So what actually the components are, what is the procedure, what is the machine by which this is being performed?
It's by CRRT machine.
Or is a normal dialysis machine or something else?
CRRT machine.
Okay, CRRT machine. Okay, next slide.
Yeah, can I ask a few questions?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, even in a normal dialysis machine, you can do it. There's no necessity that you should have the other machine, or you can do online machine. I mean, unless this column, actually, this so-called cytosol is the company name. What is the procedure name?
Hematobsorption.
It does. I mean, this filter, what it does?
It adsorbs cytokine. Adsorption. Hematobsorption.
Sure, this is a adsorption. Yes, the answer is yes, adsorption. But what is the procedure we call? Call it a hemoperfusion. Under the general head of hemoperfusion, we call this the adsorption column. How long you want to use this adsorption column? Suppose you put this in the circuit, how long you want to utilize this adsorption? What is the prescription?
Duration of
How long you want to?
It is for single use for 12 hours.
It's only 4 to 6 hours. The prescription is only 4 to 6 hours, because by 4 to 6 hours, all the adsorption surface is saturated with the cytokines. You can't, if you prolong the whole procedure, you can't prolong the cytokine absorption any further. 4 to 6 hours, and then if you want to repeat it, you have to change the filter. You have to stop the procedure, change the filter, another filter. So 4 hours is the company prescription. You can extend up to 6 hours, but beyond 6 hours, many of us actually is doing that. That's wrong actually. It does not work. The second column actually, you can have a normal hemodialysis filter here. It is not necessarily you have to have a hemodiafiltration here. It is on the series. It's only pump is pushing it, and if you have a normal dialysis here and a hemofilter here, I mean hemo-adsorption column here, hemo-perfusion filter here, so you can go ahead. It's not necessary you have to have a CRRT machine for this. You can have a normal dialysis machine. This is a pump. So in the pump, in between your hemodialysis filter and this pump, you have another circuit. This hemofilter circuit and this connection. That's it. So it's not necessary you have to have a CRT machine. You can do it a normal machine also. So this is one the point. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So next question, what physical principle are utilized?
get that. Could you try again?
Already, sir has said that this is basically a heme adsorption procedure. The question 3 is, what is the rationale for this therapy in COVID-19?
Okay. What
Excess of production of cytokines due to inadequate regulation of immune system. So removal of cytokines can help to the COVID-19 patient. This is the rationale behind the therapy.
Okay, that's true. So in patients with cytokine storm and AKI, specifically in those patients, we can use this. So how do you monitor
The patient was in the second week of the disease.
Yes.
So it was day 12.
To monitor the therapeutic efficacy of this system?
Sir, we will have to monitor IL-6 levels.
Yes. Any clinical parameters?
Means, a response to blood pressure and other parameters like oxygen saturation.
Yes. So hemodynamic stability, oxygenations improvement, the volume status of the patients, and some biochemical parameters like stabilizations of the other metabolic parameters, and finally the interleukin levels or cytokine levels. Okay, next slide. So the next question is, you are asked to examine a 69-year-old diabetic male who is shifted to general ward from ICU this morning for worsening of renal function with serum creatinine of 2.3 after successful PTCA for recent acute myocardial infarction 2 weeks back. He is now complaining of loss of his vision on right eye. The patient says the vision was dull for a few minutes only, then it improves, but he is feeling pain in the right toe and developed some skin rashes. Next slide. While doing the fundoscopy examination, the following findings were found. What is the abnormality which is being shown? The arrow is
cholesterol emboli. Actually, cholesterol emboli.
okay. Next question. Next slide, sorry. So what this picture suggests?
It suggests peripheral emboli, emboli shower.
Leading to?
Leading to multiple ischemic, multiple ischemia, gangrene of toe, multiple toe.
Yes, so atheroembolism causing multiple areas of ischemia and early gangrene. Next slide. What is this skin rash?
This is libido reticulans.
Yes, true. Next slide. This was the lab findings of the urine sample. Identify the crystal shown.
These are cholesterol crystals.
Yes, and on the right side, some specific cells are being shown. What are this? Is the Hansel stain? It has been written. So, what we are looking for?
There is a eosinophiluria after cholesterol emboli. So we are looking for eosinophils.
Okay. Next slide. This is the peripheral blood smear picture. What are the cells? So, the larger cells with a multi-lobe nuclei.
Yeah, eosinophils.
Next slide. What do you feel in peripheral pulses?
Those will be diminished,
The peripheral pulses for this patient.
diminished or absent.
Okay.
No. Those will be normal, as there will be the emboli will be in at distal location. They won't block the whole vessel. If there's a large vessel blockage, then it will be there.
So this is a
diminished.
tricky question because this cholesterol emboli, they actually blocks the peripheral small vessels, and the main vessels where we do feel the pulses, that they remain intact and we can feel the normal pulses. What is the final diagnosis of this clinical syndrome?
Cholesterol embolism.
Yes, following a invasive procedure of
Ratnesh, when
sir.
when I give you a lead question actually during transplant, I said that after transplants, few days before you do the angio and after transplant. So you cannot say this is atheroembolic disease. You have to mind that actually that can happen actually.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So then next slide. So we have the third OSCE question. It's a 24 years old male, CKD5 on maintenance hemodialysis and native kidney disease was acute, admitted for a diseased donor kidney transplantations, and the donor being 60 years female died because of the intracranial hemorrhage with a creatinine of 1.2, and at the before the time of death, her urine output was quite good, around 3.5 to 4 liter. HLA mismatch was found to be 3/6. CDC cross match was negative. PRA was 18%. Viral serology were negative for both. Right kidney of the donor was transplanted, and the cold ischemia time was around 16 hours. Induction was given with basiliximab and methylprednisolone and maintained on tacrolimus, mycophenolate, and prednisolone. So next slide. On first POD, patient was doing fine with a urine output of around 4 liter and USG Doppler screening was done. So interpret the study. It's a routine screening USG Doppler study of the graft kidney. What things we should notice in the USG Doppler while we are doing looking for a graft kidney Doppler? What are the things we should look for?
We should look for peak systolic flow and at anastomosis, peak systolic flow and the diastolic flow. If there's a rise in resistive index, there's a likelihood of there could be ATM or there could be chances of graft artery stenosis in a very high peak systolic flow.
Yes, so we should always look for the blood supply of the kidney, whether these are intact. So by the points of pre-systolic velocity, resistive index, and then we should look for the parenchyma, and finally we should look for any obstruction is there or not. So next slide. Next slide, please. Mr. Vijay, can we go to the next slide, please?
Okay. 1 second, sir. I think stuck up.
Sir, do you want to say something regarding the screening USG Doppler? Anything else to be looked for on day POD1, who is apparently doing fine till now?
Yeah, we do the routine actually. We do ourselves. So we are expertise in that. So we go for the actually if you put over the kidney and the regional perfusion of the
Light change
kidney
karo beta. Why?
and the resistive index, they come automatically.
Yes. So, in course of next few days, we can see the urine output dropping drastically from day 1 to day 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can see the serum creatinine, it's almost around 10. We can see the hemoglobin level is gradually dropping. Platelet count is more or less within a normal limit. WBC count initially were fluctuating. It's went up to 16,000, then came down and again go up. And so next slide, please. So what is the clinical diagnosis at this point?
At this point,
What is the clinical diagnosis? It's only clinical diagnosis. A patient who is having less urine output, rising creatinine from day POD 2 or 3. It's a broad diagnosis. Don't think about
sorry, sir, I cannot. Delayed graft function, sir.
For that, we have to wait for some more days. We have to wait for first week, and if the patient requires dialysis, then on the very second day, we can say this is early graft dysfunction, early acute graft dysfunction. And what are the most likely etiologies or differential diagnosis at this point of time?
At this point of time, at this point of time,
acute onset graft dysfunction.
okay. At this point of time, graft was means blood supply, means arterial supply, arterial thrombosis, or is one of the possibility. Apart from that, there is a drop in hemoglobin. Though if hemodynamics are stable, then we will have to consider if there is associated means if hemodynamics are unstable, then we'll have to consider for that possibility if there is a surgical complication in the form of bleeding. Apart from that, there is chances that patient can have delayed this acute tubular injury graft uh, the cold ischemia time itself or intraoperative drop in blood pressure. So these possibilities I will keep. And the one more possibility is rejection. Since we have the rejection possibility, we will have to keep.
Okay. So the very early graft dysfunction are mostly because of secondary to surgical causes, surgical complications. And in disease donor transplantation, it can be because of the acute tubular injury or acute tubular necrosis. And this can be a case of acute antibody mediated rejections also. So, and we have to look for the vasculatures and any obstructions if there. The first day POD1 USG Doppler screening excluded any kind of vascular obstruction. The first day screening was absolutely fine. So let us go to the next slide, please. So considering the early acute graft dysfunction, biopsy was performed. Can you comment on how the glomeruli are looking, and how the tubules? How are the tubules? What stain is being used?
It is H&E staining.
Yes. Grossly, how the tubules are and how the glomeruli are.
glomeruli are
Glomeruli, okay.
appear.
Actually, the glomeruli are more or less normal, and the tubules which are being shown filled up with some pinkish material which are devoid of any kind of nuclei, and it's hard to see, hard to tell in this power that, but there are tubular evidence of tubular necrosis. Tubules are not back to back, and there are, the lumen is filled with some kind of homogeneous material. Okay, next slide. So what is the histopathological diagnosis? Glomeruli are perfectly normal. So at this point we can say this is acute
Tubular injury.
Tubular injury. And what do you think that the pinkish material within that tubules? Those are devoid of any nuclei. So this is acellular material.
Okay. Can't comment. Hyaline casts are there, but I cannot comment exactly. Probably those are shredded cells are there. So,
okay. Okay, those are basically because of the coagulative necrosis, necrotic material which is present in the tubules. Those things are coagulative necrosis, and some brush borders epithelial cells which are being shredded off, and they are also joining them. So what is the common etiology of this entity? So this is acute tubular necrosis in an immediate post-transplant patient. So what are the common etiologies of acute tubular necrosis or acute, say, cortical necrosis in this transplant kidney or in native kidney? What are the causes of acute tubular necrosis and acute cortical necrosis?
to this transplant kidney with deceased donor, I would keep ischemia reperfusion injury or ischemia itself, cold ischemia itself as a cause of likely causes of acute tubular injury.
Okay.
Apart from that, in rare instances, there in case of rejection also, acute antibody mediated rejection also, there can be picture of ATN, and also
this is this is as because there is a coagulative necrosis and cortical necrosis. This is something more severe than that of the common acute tubular injury or acute tubular necrosis, which we find more commonly. This is relatively rarer than the acute tubular necrosis. This is a cortical necrosis that is causing the formations of coagulative necrosis. So acute tubular, acute cortical necrosis can also be seen in patients with acute TMA in immediate post-transplant period. Anything else?
antibody mediated rejection, severe antibody mediated rejection, and
Yes.
vascular injury.
Other causes?
So vascular injury in the form.
Yes, vascular thrombosis. That can be arterial or venous. Yes. Antiphospholipid antibody syndromes. What are the common causes or etiologies of acute cortical necrosis in a native kidney biopsy? If we find this kind of picture in a native kidney, acute cortical necrosis, what are the common causes?
Common causes include postpartum hemorrhage, snake bite,
yes,
and lupus anticoagulant,
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So a whole lot of kidney diseases associated with pregnancies are more or less associated with cortical necrosis, and we often found them. This kind of patients often becomes dialysis dependent and remain on dialysis. That can be because of the pregnancy associated toxemia of pregnancy, preeclampsia, eclampsia, pregnancy associated TMA, HUS, TTPs, and also the snake bite, post snake bite, sepsis, DIC, pancreatitis. So there are quite a lot of disease that can finally lead to cortical necrosis, and this the finally end up into end stage renal disease and dialysis dependent. So now what further evaluation you would like to do for this patient who have been found to have early immediate post-transplant graft dysfunction, and on histopathology, a diagnosis of cortical necrosis was done.
I would like to keep a possibility of rejection. I would like to rule out rejection with the C4D staining. Apart from that, there is a mild decrease in some platelet counts and leukocyte count. I will keep a possibility of thrombotic microangiopathy. Will have to see for peripheral smear for schistocytes, fragmented RBCs, and we'll have to evaluate for LDH levels. Apart from this, we have done ultrasonography, so probably it showed good flow. So still we'll have to keep a possibility. So at day 1, so we'll have to reassess if it is still developing any other thrombosis or any obstruction. And native kidney disease was SCACUD. So I am not very much sure about whether we should go for checking for Appler syndrome at this point of time. I won't go.
Okay, you are on the right track. Let us go to the next slide, please. So DSA by SAB method was done, which was a single antigen bead was found to be negative. Tacrolimus level was within normal range. Biopsy didn't show any glomerulitis or peritubular capillaritis. C4D was found to be negative. LDH was normal, and there was absence of any fragmented RBCs in peripheral blood picture. Next slide, please. So ultrasonography Doppler and followed by a CECT graft kidney was done, which revealed the arrow. Can you tell what the arrow is showing? In the left hand side, the CECT which is showing in the left hand side, not in the right, in the left hand side. No.
This
The CECT.
left hand side.
So the right sided picture is a angio picture. This can give you a clue. What is this? The black arrow. What is this showing? It's a filling defect. It's in the
Filling defect. Okay, it's a thrombus.
It's a graft kidney vein, and it's showing a filling defect. And in the picture B, it has been cannulated. We can see the cannula. So something is being performed. So it's a therapeutic procedure which is being done for this thrombus in the renal vein. What is being tried in this patient after being cannulating the graft vein?
Angioplasty, venous angioplasty.
Okay. So here this is being performed for by thrombolysis by using a tissue plasminogen activator. Okay, next slide. The radiological diagnosis you have already mentioned. How to manage this condition?
So at this point of time, we can go for systemic anticoagulation, or we can go for targeted thrombectomy, or with streptokinase, or we can go for Fogarty catheter to remove the thrombus, suction catheter.
So medical management and or surgical interventions that includes targeted thrombolysis or thrombectomy or stenting. And if all these measures fails, then what? Suppose a repeat biopsy is being done, which is again showing presence of cortical necrosis after almost 4 or 5 days of this procedure is being done, and the patient's renal function is not improving. What will you want to do?
So once again, please question.
Suppose this thrombectomy has been performed, and in spite of that, the renal function is not improving. A repeat biopsy has been done, which is again showing extensive cortical necrosis.
Okay.
What will be your plan regarding the continuation of immunosuppression and continuation with the graft?
So we will again reassess if there is a rethrombosis, again development of thrombosis is there or not. If it is not there, we will wait and see if the patient, if there is some residual graft function develops or not. If it doesn't develop after say 1 week, say 1 to 2 weeks, or the patient is developing complications related with the cortical necrosis in the form of DIC sometimes, or secondary infections, then we will have to go for graft nephrectomy.
So the answer should be at the earliest indications of a DIC, or if the repeat biopsy is again showing extensive cortical necrosis, we should go for graft nephrectomy and reduction of immunosuppression. Okay, next slide. So this case was taken from AJKD. It has this. You can always go through that interesting cases which are being published in AJKD, and will help you to prepare yourself for OSCE sessions. So,
Just
sir,
can I interrupt?
Sir, you want to have some?
Yes, just I want to tell that this is arterial thrombosis and venous thrombosis, both can happen in the post-transplant period, but the difference is that arterial thrombosis is very dramatic and they can be diagnosed by simple tests like Doppler. They are diagnosed very early, and if they are taken care of adequately, the chances of recovery is much more. And in arterial thrombosis, the threat lies to the kidney only, but instead, this venous thrombosis, this happens in a very subtle manner. They don't have a very acute presentation. They happen usually slightly late in the post-trans, not in the very first day. It may be at the end of first week also. So it is a late presentation, very subtle presentation. And if you don't think of, you may not detect this. And the treatment is very important, because the threat is not only to the graft but also to the patient. If the vein is thrombosed, the graft will be congested and there may be chances of graft rupture and loss of life. So in those situations, your decision taking is much more important. So both can happen, both is written in the textbook one after another, but they have a different kind of presentation and different kind of treatment. That's how I was telling.
Thank you, sir. Pahari sir, do you want to have some comment?
Actually, the venous thrombosis, they present in a little different way, apart from the just urine drop in urine output. Actually, if you follow, the graft is congested, it will increase in size, and congestion of the kidney, I think that is the one which you can pick up easily by the this thing. So graft dysfunction, enlarged kidneys, and sometimes there is a rupture of the capsule or perinephric hematoma. So these are the things actually you pick up in the ultrasound. Because see, we have been doing the transplant graft ultrasound every day, I mean, for almost all of our patients. And then we learn all this. So even if you they come with the hematuria. Hematuria, the graft pain and the drop in urine output. So that is how you think of possibly you are dealing with a renal vein thrombosis.
Yes. Thank you, sir. And thank you, Dr. Ratnesh. Over to you, Biplab, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So the excellent auscultation, Ravi. Thank you for that. Bhai sir, thank you very much for spending almost 2 hours with us. And it has been a real nice learning experience for all of us, actually. I think the students have benefited a lot from today's session. And over to you, Mr. Raja.
Sir, Dr. Pratik Das would like to add something, sir.
No, okay. Just as I'd like to thank our sir, Professor Pahari, for this very good session,
Yes,
and
sir.
also this. Everybody is involved in this classroom because it is, after all, the ultimate target is to enrich all of us, not only the students, all of us in terms of nephrology science. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all.
Sir, in fact, last week also we had 100 plus. This time we had close to 120 students, including YouTube. So from YouTube also a couple of students are participating. So I've already floated the queries regarding for the next 2 programs discussion, and once I get them enrolled, I'll forward it to you, sir. So based on the advisory committee's recommendation, we'll finalize the student. So thank you very much, all the students, for your patient listening. And as my colleague Vijay has already posted, if you're interested to be part of this program as a discussant, feel free to just write to us along with your name and year, as well as the study medical from the city. So we will get in touch with you and accordingly do the needful based on the recommendations of the advisory board. So thank you very much, one and all. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.